the least safe thing you can do is rely on a boss to pay you.
Welcome to the 9 to 5 Quitters Club, the podcast uncovering the creator entrepreneurs at the forefront of a work revolution, chasing their passions on their own terms and calling the shots when it comes to how they spend their time. Today, we're talking to Jack Appleby. Jack has over 15 years experience crafting social strategy for such companies as Beats by Dre, Verizon, and Microsoft, as well as a stint at Morning Brew where he was convinced to start his own newsletter. Jack grew that newsletter, Future Social, into a thriving six-figure business and continues to grow his audience, teaching others his unique approach to social strategy. In this episode, we touch on Jack's journey to breaking free of the 9 to 5 state of mind.
The job that brought me to New York to work for RGA, a very prestigious ad agency, that came from Twitter DMs.
His perspective on building your own personal brand.
Cold applications don't work. Like, it's all about who you know, and I can increase the number of people I know if I'm putting out content that is relevant to my industry.
And make sure to stick around till the end for Jack's top advice for starting your own content business.
If you're picking what kind of content you're gonna make, pick the kind you wanna make. The algorithms will support whatever it is, as long as you have a strong social hook and a strong value prop.
Talking to Jack was a masterclass of how to build and leverage a personal brand to unlock potential in your career that you probably never knew was possible. But now let's dive in, and we hope you enjoy this conversation with Jack Appleby. What was that moment for you where you realized that this could challenge or replace your 9 to 5 mentality?
So I think contextualizing the business is really important. Like, I built my Twitter and LinkedIn audience on my own fully. And then credit Morning Brew, my pals over there were the ones who said dude, you're a content creator. Am I? I've just been I enjoy doing it, but I never had aspirations to make content full time. Never thought about owning my own business. These were not on my radar. But they're the ones who convinced me, when I was at Twitch, to come over, we'll build a newsletter around you. And the first year of Future Social, it was a Morning Brew product that I was the face of. I was a salaried employee / rev share type of creator there before they sunsetted the program, and I had a chance to own the whole thing for myself. So that's where I want to make sure they get credits for helping me do the first year of this thing. There's a lot of creators out there who quit their job to go all in, or we're working 100-hour weeks to make it work while they're working their full-time job. I fought being a creator. I was doing it because I just enjoyed it. And I thought it's how I would find my next advertising job or my next advertising clients. And that happened. I worked on Spotify at an ad agency because a Spotify product manager cold DM'd me on Twitter because he liked my writing about advertising. It's I'd like to work with you and see how that might work. And I brought that business into my agency.
Oh, so you were already funneling business into the agency.
Yeah. I've, over the years, I shouldn't take credit. Over the years, it's been a mixture of let's say somewhere between $500,000 and a couple $1 million of work that came from my Twitter account to my ad agencies. And I wasn't smart enough to get a fee on top of that stuff. I was a young strategist, happy to write, oh, look, we have cool things coming in from this. But again, the reason I mention all that is I just liked to write and to think about this stuff. And that's why I was making the content. If Morning Brew hadn't offered me a salary to start becoming a creator, I don't know if I would have, I can tell you fundamentally, I would have never thought of it as my full-time job. It took a company saying, we will pay you to do this for me to actually believe it was possible.
That's a rare freaking situation.
It's incredibly rare. And it's a mixture of a lot of things. It's that I write as a creator, that I'm writing about a subject matter that is really important to business media companies.
Yeah.
So there's not a ton of people writing about social media strategy or even brand strategy, really. There's the various outlets that have reporters who either haven't worked a day in those industries or worked some and are learning how to report about that. But there weren't a lot of practitioners writing about this. So it became, again, by accident, build something that was very appealing to business media companies, which then if Morning Brew is the one who paid me to become a creator, now other companies pay to get featured in my content or for me to speak for them at events. So it's, if you're listening to this, if you're not a creator yet, it'd be easy to have the reaction of that's not replicable. I think what you can continue to create, though, the reason these companies came after me was I had 40,000 followers on Twitter and I was highly engaged and thought of as thought leader and personality within my industry. That is an industry you can sell significant ads against. So even though I wasn't trying for it, I positioned myself in a way for it.
Which is something we're seeing more and more in this space. Besides the money you can make in your own business, because it gives you power and authority within your 9 to 5 or whatever kind of job.
I think everyone should start a personal brand on the side for the same reason I initially did it, which was cold applications don't work. Like, it's all about who you know, and I can increase the number of people I know if I'm putting out content like that is relevant to my industry. That was the only reason I did it. And like the job that brought me to New York to work for RGA, a very prestigious ad agency, that came from Twitter DMs from like my boss, and I interacted a lot on Twitter, and I asked her like, what should I do with myself for the next phase of my career? She said, come work for me. When I got laid off from that job because of COVID, I'm in New York with no idea what I'm going to do. I had built this audience and tweeted like, hi, I'm available for the first time ever in my career. I'd never not had a job before.
Yeah.
And 12 minutes after that, Twitch DM'd me, would you work here? And then 3 months later, I'm working at Twitch. And that's all because I built a professional personal brand long before I became a content creator in that space. Or let's say a professional content creator.
Why don't you think you made that jump earlier? You were just comfortable?
I'm a pretty risk averse guy. Like the idea of abandoning something that's working for a higher risk, higher reward situation, like it's not how I was raised. It's not how I think. And I've gotten better at it over the years now. The two biggest things that affected my professional content creation career, those were not because I made like a brave leap. Those are because I handled a like weird situation very well. If I hadn't gotten laid off from the job, I wouldn't have gone for the Twitch job, which was not an ad agency job. I was always thought I'd be at agencies. And then when Morning Brew hit me up, that's a big leap. I didn't know if I could do that or not. And they convinced me. And now here we are.
It sounds like by the time you were taking it over yourself, it was pretty clear you had a business.
I knew it was a business, mostly because the only ads that were sold into my newsletter in the first year, even when I was at Morning Brew, I brought in myself. I brought in a 6-figure sponsor myself, technically for Morning Brew, for myself. I had a rev share deal, but I brought that in from an organic LinkedIn comment. Like I said, we're accepting sponsorships. Here's what we are. Here's what I've built. And someone who had read me for a long time, like organic LinkedIn comment to a Zoom conversation to a 6-figure deal for a mixture of newsletter content and webinars and video content.
It does sound like along that journey, although you were risk averse, you're looking for certain opportunities. If you are to give advice from your otherwise maybe not replicable like scenario, what are the things you think someone can take away and apply, whether they're doing a creator life or in their 9 to 5?
I think if you are a 9 to 5 professional working in a space where like you would probably look on LinkedIn to find your next job, you should start sharing your thoughts and your opinions on LinkedIn. Anyone can do it. You don't have to be spicy. Just share like what you're thinking about the day-to-day life of your job, things happening in the industry. Again, you don't have to be controversial. You can only highlight if you want to, and start to build a personal brand where you'd be amazed what interviews you get or who you meet as a result of that. If you're a content creator, if that's the goal, the long-term goal, whether it's today, tomorrow, or 10 years, figure out the value prop of why people should follow you and why you're the right person for it. Like basically take every question that the sharks ask you on Shark Tank and apply it to like your personal brand. Like why you, like what's unique here. If you can answer those questions, like you really have something. My biggest platform is 73,000 newsletter subscribers. My Twitter and my LinkedIn, those have 65, 66,000 followers. But like I have what looks to be a $500,000 business this year, even at that audience size, because I've spent years developing my reputation in the industry. I'm highly engaged despite my audience size. My content is considered high value educational long form content, not 15-second Instagram reels. People latch onto it and they can share it around. It can be the piece that you're sending to your CEO. Here's how I think we should approach this. Or here's a brand that's doing something really cool. And we use that to justify how we're doing our next thing. You don't have to give me credit. Just like copy paste the things from my newsletter and send it in an email to your boss and say like, hey, I found this thing where this brand's doing something on TikTok. Can we do something like this? I don't care. Like I'm giving you the value. That's the goal. It's just like to continually provide people with the tools they need.
Well, and you kind of have, like a lot of creators, somewhat of a Robin Hood approach of just give it away for free, take the money from the people with a lot of money.
When I can, I like to do that. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. I know a lot of creators or professionals, when they're starting to post on LinkedIn or something, it takes a little bit for these kind of benefits you're talking about. Are you focused on the skill? Are you focusing on just the craft of storytelling to a certain point before you're worried about who's commenting? and what opportunities are coming, because that could take a while.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've really tried to self-examine to make sure, like, when I share like my tips for this stuff, I'm like giving credit to what I've spent 15 years crafting versus what I think someone can learn like in a day. I think that this is why the most important thing overall is like, do you like the content you're making? Like, are you finding fulfillment in your own content? Because if you're not, there at some point there will not be enough dopamine hits to keep you going if you don't love what you're making. Like for me, like my Twitter account was a lot of, I don't know if we even use this term, it was a lot of like Twitter threads that were like these case study things I was crafting where I do in 140 and 280 character bits, like, here's a point about this piece of content, and that leads into this, and here's why I think the strategy worked for that, and all that stuff. I just loved writing about that stuff. It was an interest of mine. So lean into like the thing that you're most interested in. Like, hopefully it's professional if you're hoping to build a professional personal brand. Start there, impress yourself, and then slowly start to build and slowly start to do like the growth hacky or like the best practice things to make what is like your most original content better.
Stick around. We'll jump right back into the conversation after this brief message. This podcast is brought to you by Teachable and therefore has no sponsors. So we just wanted to take a moment to encourage you to go check out Jack's newsletter, Future Social, where Jack delivers award-winning case studies, theoretical social strategies, and follow the bouncing ball content breakdowns to help build the best social strategy. Creators like Jack are the reason this podcast exists, so supporting them helps support our ability to bring you more of their stories and lessons. You can find more from Jack at futuresocial.beehive.com, which is also linked in the show notes or description below wherever you're watching or listening. Okay, now let's get back to the episode. I like the way you phrase it, of the dopamine hits with social, that you're looking for it to give you those dopamine hits rather than yourself.
Separate from my marketing business, a year ago, I decided I wanted to get back into basketball. Played my whole life, my favorite thing in the world. Dealt with some injuries, COVID happened, put on some weight during the pandemic, and wanted to get back into it. I like making, like, I call them like art projects. Casey Neistat's my hero. Like, I like to make little movies about things. So I started making these jokey videos that I was like, I'm a 35-year-old washed up ex-college player who's just trying to get it back. I just want to play with video editing and storytelling and like maybe meet some other guys who view the sport the way I do, where it's just like street ball, more like organized. We were taught how to play the game. Everyone stays involved. The third one I ever made did 1 million views on an Instagram account with 7,000 followers. I was like, oh, there's something here. And I kept making them. And I wasn't doing anything to appeal to a certain person. I was exclusively making content that was for me. I think basketball culture largely sucks. So I was like, how can I improve basketball culture? What's my perspective on this? Here's how I'm forming my perfect rec league basketball team. Here's how I'm pursuing a different type of basketball player to be buddies with in my life, because I don't relate to like a lot of the younger guys in the game anymore. Now I have 80,000 followers in 1 year who are watching me play like washed up rec league basketball for the most part, because I was making the content for me. And I had the best practices. Like, I knew the storytelling styles. I knew how to build a series, but the core concept is for me. Right. And I'm just sharing like my perspective on this with people. And I think that's what people don't do enough is, what is your perspective? You'll learn the storytelling techniques as you go about that. But like, what are your ideas? People got to focus on ideas more than anything.
We will get into that because you seem to have a knack and a habit of creating platforms.
It's a weird habit, but it's true.
You've had a somewhat unusual path to this from a lot of,
yeah, for sure.
I would like to talk more about your like storytelling, because it seems like that's really the heart of what you teach. Was that something you saw in your experience in the business and then brought to yourself, or was it a skill you developed and then recognized was an asset? Did you take it or did you grow it, I guess is the question.
I think I grew it. I do think one of the biggest like career hacks that I had was I started in video game advertising, which I think video games understood the value of great content and community like much, much earlier.
When
than
was
a lot
this?
of brands. This was, so I left college in 2011. The contents of social media at this point. Instagram's not on Android yet. Facebook didn't have video when I first started. YouTube videos hit 301 plus on view count before they get the actual real-time views. Like, social was very different at that point. But we like, because it was video games, like they were content products. It's a content business. So we were doing things like when I left to go work in like CPG or like selling headphones, like that kind of stuff. I couldn't believe how behind those industries were from the video game industry. Like community management is very important in the video game industry. But I learned fast because of that industry. And like you learn to make great content because you have the tools to make great content. Then you go work in other industries like, oh, like we're doing a lot of product shots, or we're doing like, I'm working with some of the most famous pro athletes of all time, but they're reading VO like a bad Nike commercial. I'm like, this is like it's like a bad TV commercial. It's going to sit on Instagram. Who cares? That's all to say. I think purpose of content was something that was always very important to me. Is like, are we actually entertaining? Are we actually educating someone? You combine that with like my own fascination with screenwriting and storytelling. Like I'm the kind of guy where like I spent every Sunday for months taking a Pixar storytelling class that was actually had like Pixar staff who taught it through one of those free platforms. I forget which one. That was fun for me. And then I applied that to how I did social media. And I took a screenwriting class like from like another like famous writer. And I started applying that to my own content and how I write an essay. Why not apply a 3-act structure to an essay on social media strategy? Why not make sure that I have conflict and resolution in a video about a rec league basketball game? And a lot of that I stole from Casey Neistat.
Why do you think storytelling and personal storytelling, like all these creators are doing, works for marketing?
I won't speak to the other creators. I think everyone's got their secret sauce and would describe themselves differently. I think for me, the longer I write and the more content I make, the more me it's becoming in like just casual language. Like the way we're talking to each other right now, the newsletter has slang in it. Like
Right.
I'll put wanna instead of want to because that's how I speak. And that's as much a personal stylistic choice as it is like became a differentiator. It doesn't feel stale. When I analyze a piece of content in the newsletter, I'll share an anecdote from my career written in my very casual language alongside why this other piece of new content I think is resonating with people, and then how I think you could apply that to your brand. And I think I'm just hitting you through a little bit personal. It's a little bit educational, a little bit like, I think just the package after all these years balanced out in a way that works. So I guess, yes, I think storytelling does build trust if you can make someone feel very complete with the stories you're telling them. I think what I'm really good at is either finding things that are compelling or making something compelling. And I don't think it's always about like smearing something special on it. I wrote 2 weeks ago, it was about Sesame Street's Twitter strategy. There wasn't like a clever headline. The name of the email that I went out that week was the Sesame Street Twitter strategy, because it's a big, huge brand name. It's implied that it's a social article because I say Twitter in there. I imply that you're going to learn how a known brand does something. Like, I do think I'm really good at identifying when to be clever versus when to be on the nose and what's going to be most compelling based on who I'm trying to reach, whether it's from my own content or when I worked for all these brands back in the day.
And you still think that starts a lot with figuring out how to do that for your own taste? And then you learn from experience how to do that for other people?
I did it the other way. I did it for other people and then did it for myself. And I think a lot of marketing creators don't work for like nearly as many different brands as I did before they do it for themselves. I had tried every voice and tone possible by the time I started making my own content. Like I might be working on a zombie video game one day and then selling a premium headphone the next day, which are drastically different voice and tone for drastically different consumers. I was asked to appeal to different audiences from my day job because I grew up like a real awkward kid who wanted to understand people, wanted to understand why I didn't fit in. So I put a lot of time and effort into learning like how people think, what people like how to be a human, basically. Like jumble all that into like this weird duct tape ball of me understanding pretty well how to share things with people that they'll find interesting.
This could be a short answer, but do you think that brands can replicate the kind of connection in a story that a person can?
Yes, but I think most aren't willing to do the things that they would need to do it.
Do you have any just like the most powerful nuggets for how someone can craft their own story, or even just how you practice getting good at that art?
You got to be willing to suck at it.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to be terrible. I had a lot of people over the years who thought I was cringy, or like people I knew who were like, what does he do? What are you doing? Like, why are you tweeting about like the first personal branding decision you make is like when you pick your first Pokemon? They're like, what does that even mean? I thought it was funny. I thought it was like very like intuitive, like something that people could relate to. I remember a boss making fun of me for that. And like now I'm making over double the salary I made to talk about exactly that kind of stuff for a living. There were plenty of people who were like, this doesn't make any sense to us. It's like just being willing to like do the things that you're interested in, staying interested in it, and just the reps. That's how you learn how to do this stuff.
You have built an incredible business. You're, I would say, arguably wealthy as far as generating income for yourself. What the heck is that like?
What can I'm pretty transparent. Like, what can I answer
not
for
like
you?
a million. No, but in the sense of, I've seen even just over the last few weeks that you are constantly working mentally.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like you're working less or going and chilling on the beach in that sense of being wealthy, but what does it feel to own the means of your income generation?
It's funny. My parents are business owners, and they encouraged us to live very like safe, conservative lifestyles. That's how I got to the whole being risk averse thing. We were like, go get real jobs. You don't have to do the things that we had to do. And that's why I was okay being an employee like for a long time. I never aspired to be a business owner, like partially because I like being on teams. I like the stability of a paycheck. And then I remember there was a book, I think it's called Entrepreneurial Me. To be clear, I didn't read the whole book, but I opened the first page. And on that first page, he goes, the least safe thing you can do is rely on a boss to pay you, basically. I'm paraphrasing. I was like, oh, they could lay me off whenever they want. And I'm getting this one salary and I'm gonna have to convince them constantly to get raises. It's something that stuck in my mind. Didn't do anything about it, but I thought about it for a long time. Now I'm in this space where everything I do, I can decide whether it's for me, for like growth of the business. I need to go earn some money. So like being able to control my own destiny, now that I know what I'm doing, is very fun. It's very rewarding. It's very fulfilling. And like you happen to have met me in a running around like crazy phase.
Sure.
I don't aspire to work a ton. You become a solopreneur to build your dream lifestyle. Like one of the reasons I'm running around like crazy is because I'm pursuing semi-pro basketball at 35 because it's just fun for me. And I can work out twice a day to do that because I built this business for myself that's very customized. The month you met me where I was also busy, that was a $60,000 month for me, which is the best month I've ever had of my life. So that's not how things will always work. And I don't want it to always work that way because I want to work 30 to 40 hours a week and I'll do high value things. I want to make sure I like really value my own time and my own interests. But like there is a bit of a, if I want to go do things I haven't done or like build things to generate additional income, yeah, I have to flex up sometimes to do that. And then sometimes I can be happy with what I have and coast. I haven't tried to build my audience in 2 years. My growth has been flat. I was focused on how do I monetize this? How do I make sure like the newsletter content is extremely good? And that's the only platform that's grown is the newsletter. My Twitter and LinkedIn have been totally flat for like a year. And that's because I didn't put that much effort into the content there. I'd already built such reputation that I wanted to figure out how to build the business.
You are an educational creator. You just haven't created educational products of that.
Which is a huge miss. But yes.
When you were in Nashville with the 20 top creators, for you with your like keen eye for it and for your business, were there specific ones that popped out beyond just like courses, just how people are generating revenue in this economy?
I think it's interesting because I was working, like my last job was with Twitch. So I was on the creator strategy team over there. I've watched creators come up with every idea under the sun to monetize outside of brand deals. Just again, like I just find the business of content so interesting. I remember when Logan Paul was primarily a YouTuber, I went on his merch store and like he had 100 items, 80% of them were sold out. Maybe he was doing something like 10 million a month or something like that in merch. I forget. It's been a long time. I was like, oh my God. His merch was based on his parrots. Like it was the craziest thing. But past that, most of us can't sell t-shirts. No one wants a t-shirt from a guy who writes about social strategy for a living. I've looked into a lot of these different ways that creators monetize. And I think you and I both share like the music history. Bands that are having coffee bean brews that are specifically for them, or beer lines, or one of my favorite bands dropped a wood print version and a blanket of their album art that are both in my apartment.
That's fun.
I happily dropped $75 for a blanket of one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah.
That like, it works as an art piece. There's so many different ways to do this. I think the thing that's most interesting to me is how people decide like what their audience is actually interested in. And just like I was slow moving into becoming a full-time creator, I've been slow moving into building digital products because it's, to me, I want to be so sure about what I'm building before I build it, which is probably a mistake, to be clear. It's why most of my stuff does work, but I probably leave a lot of money on the table by not like launching things faster.
As someone who doesn't really need it for your business, is it just a revenue growth opportunity?
If we're talking creator economy, from working with Teachable and like meeting other Teachable creators, I didn't realize the amount of money that people are generating on courses. That was amazing to me. And like I speak on creator economy panels all the time.
It's nuts.
Courses don't come up much, and it's crazy that it doesn't. So yes, there's certainly I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a revenue element to it I'm interested in, as well as diversify my own business. So I'm not relying on brand deals. But I know course creators who have like basically killed themselves to make these courses and like burned out hard for making courses. And that's what scared me off originally. As I've learned more, I've realized like that it is a chance for me to teach in a way where it's a very leaned in student. The newsletter is great because I can reach a broad audience of people. But like my favorite type of coaching and teaching is for people who are like hungry and desperate to learn things. A paying customer is someone who's like very into what you're chatting with them about. And because of that, it's my favorite person to teach. These people have put their money into it, and now I'm excited to bring them extreme value for their money.
We'll jump back into the conversation right after this brief message. Did you come out with opportunities you see within the industry in general that aren't happening, or you don't see these creators taking advantage of? Because I see a lot of people who are just sitting on opportunity as far as like how singular their business is, but it could be much more diverse.
I think as I've spoken at more creator events and like just like making pals with creators, I think that most content creators are really good at content and running the business and thinking about revenue streams. That is not something they think about, even when they're getting hundreds of thousands of followers. I met someone at an event I was at earlier this morning where she has 300,000 followers in what I would call a high value space, like career coaching for women, not doing six figures yet as a content creator. And I'm like, whoa, no, we can fix that. Like you should be making that kind of money. And that's where I think there's just so much education on creators knowing what they're worth, creators knowing how to monetize their stuff, creators knowing how to package their things. Like I think something I took for granted in my first year or two as a creator was I spent 15 years building creative packages to sell to brands. Like I pitched a $17 million campaign that we won at one of my old agencies, which is a humongous lift, and we built something colossal, and it was me and our CEO and our head of accounts who pitched that, and we won the whole thing. But I learned those sales tactics that a lot of creators don't know. They make wonderful content, and it's such a new industry that there's not as much education on how to do the rest of it as there could be. I think there's a lot of really wonderful 101 content for creators, and there's not a lot of 201 or 301 because it's a small fraction of the creator world that are pulling in like even low six figures to then get to like the 7-figure mark. There's not a ton of people doing that type of business. I love learning people more successful than me. I'm having to go actively find these people. Like it's rare I go to a conference and learn from a keynote at this point. But if I can pull them aside and ask them the specific questions I have for them, those 5 questions can like unlock my business potentially.
And how are you finding those people though?
I hunt them down on the internet. I mean, Dara Denny, who will be on this podcast too. Thankfully, I'm a humongous human. She saw me at a concert, yells like, "You're Jack." Like I read your tweets. And like I got to know what she did. She does the YouTube account about creative performance and Facebook ads. And like us becoming close friends was this huge unlock for both of us because like we're both lonely at work. We don't have anybody to throw ideas off of. I hadn't had anybody to talk to about monetization strategies ever. She had the same. And like I helped her with pricing. She helps me think through video content. Like it can just happen wherever, like putting yourself out there, asking the right questions. And then I think providing value through your own social. So when you go try to ask someone else for help, they can see that you can offer them some help is also part of it.
Did that change the kind of person you're looking out for to learn from?
That was huge for me. Like I was excited that like I got to present how to do social strategy to a group of people who are experts in a very specific type of content creation. And I was shocked to see how few of them like felt confident with their own social media. Some of them really needed some work, and some of them were much better at than they thought. I'm like, I'm sorry, you're doing what with your courses and you're making how much money and you're like, more importantly, affecting how many people with these things? I was blown away, especially because a lot of the courses were like, mine would fundamentally be educational, like career-based things. Arts and crafts courses, like psychedelics courses, like these fascinating subjects where it's not just like ROI value-based things, like lifestyle and enjoyment stuff. So it just like kind of opened up a world to me like I knew existed, but like I just never seen like the realities of before.
One thing I love working in this space is how education and educational content both connects with people, but moreover, like rises through the algorithmic mess.
Most people aren't as funny as they think they are, but like a lot of people can like, a lot of people have more to teach than they realize.
I don't think the Zuckerbergs and the Googles built the platforms to be rewarding education.
If we get into the algorithm talk, we'll be here all day.
Sure.
Like what I'll say is the algorithms are built around serving people content that they engage with and spend time with. Education content is performing more and more because people are enjoying it and people are getting better at making educational or edutainment content. So if you're picking what kind of content you're going to make, pick the kind you want to make. The algorithms will support whatever it is as long as you have a strong social hook and a strong value prop.
For yourself, what attracts you to teaching rather than just selling marketing services or building your own agency?
I enjoy that connection. Don't get me wrong. I miss consulting a lot of the time. Like I miss working at ad agencies where I'm just surrounded by this high energy environment where problem solving and a bunch of smart people are around me. Like it hits a different kick for me for sure. But with the teaching, like I just generally like helping people like learn how to do things. I was someone who was always much more curious than like the environment I was in allowed me to be. Like felt very limited by public school teachers, a community that wasn't very curious about different ways to do life. So like, I just hope to provide basically for like the things that kid me didn't get.
In our culture, though, where I think generally it's accepted we undervalue educators within our systems. Do you think there's a big paradigm shift for teachers, or it's going to have that kind of impact? Because it seems like it's still new enough that people aren't getting that teachers can actually do quite well if they take it to a larger audience.
This is where I shouldn't speak to like education as a whole. Like of course, if I could have picked any career, I probably would have been a professor or a teacher of some sort. And I didn't because I knew what teachers made for a living. I've been part of the classes where it's like half the class doesn't pay attention. That doesn't seem like a rewarding way to teach to me. But to your point, like there's now, it seems like to be a teacher in almost way that is not a public school teacher, you can make quite a living if you also understand how to market yourself, how to run a business, or have some sort of system in place, just like any other business to bring in customers. I think it's really encouraging. Like I think it's people are spending their money to learn things they want to learn versus I am supposed to spend money on this textbook at this college and this thing because I have to.
Which do you think is harder, learning how to market and be an influencer or learning how to teach?
I think it depends on who you are. I had to learn how to make what I was interested in more accessible. I always joked that like my ideal team or like work situation was like House, like the TV show House, the doctor, where it's like he's this next level expert and he's surrounded by 3 employees who have very relevant but different expertise. And the 4 of them are doing next level problem solving that no one knows how to accomplish and are using like critical thinking and their experience to come up with solutions. I love doing that type of work. And I think for a long time, like when I was using my Twitter platform as my educational tool, I was thinking about it as that in both it wasn't clear what I was saying way, because I was talking about things that were like 401 type things, and in it's a public forum, and if I critique something negatively, it's going to get back to who I'm critiquing, and that was not the goal. I thought of my Twitter as like a classroom when no, it's a TV channel. And I think I know that I upset a lot of people early on without meaning to, because I don't take that kind of feedback poorly. I worked on 3 of the lowest reviewed video games of all time. So I was used to like people like it was rough.
That lines with being an emo kid too. Like you
Totally.
don't mind being in the dirt.
Don't get me wrong. Internet negativity affects me when it's about me, but internet negativity about the brands that I worked for, I didn't care. I worked on Need for Speed: The Run, which is the lowest ranked Need for Speed game of all time. Mass Effect 3 was the promise of this like choose your own adventure trilogy where the ending was the same for everyone. It was lambasted online, even though we decided it was a great game. I became very numb to that, and I think in a healthy way. But then when I started writing about brands on my Twitter account, people were like, I spent so many hours working on that. Was like foreign to me that they would care that someone's talking about that, because like that, I didn't take it personally when that happened to me. So I had to learn that everyone processes feelings differently on the internet, and like really consider if there's something I want to speak about that I would speak about like, critically or negatively, let's say, whether it was actually worth it or not. And that's where I do a lot more highlighting now than I do negatively critiquing things. I take my shot still if I think something's egregious or like a huge waste of money or unethical. But I mostly try to highlight good stuff now because that's a little more accessible for people and people get more excited about that.
Are you someone concerned with leaving a legacy? Or while you're on this earth, what kind of impact are you trying to make?
Legacy is something I truly do not care about. Like when I am gone, I am gone. I hope the people who I love that love me are like, I hope we are enjoyed our time together.
Yeah.
But like, I do not need my name on the side of a building. I've never thought that was interesting. I think I've spent a lot of my life worrying what people think about me, as I really want to fit in with other people. So I hope that I'm viewed as someone who's like kind but honest, and like also like resilient. Like I really try to fight against people who are like being like bringing negativity to this world. Like I'm someone who fires back at my trolls a lot of the time. I hope I'm helping people learn how to be themselves by watching me struggle at it myself.
Before we wrap up this wonderful chat, we've got a couple rapid fire questions for you.
Hit me.
Game of one-on-one between 2 players from any time period, both in their prime. Who would you pick and who would win?
You know what? No, you got to go to the class. You want to do Prime Jordan versus Prime LeBron.
What's the emo song that's made you cry the most?
It hasn't made me cry, but it's like the song that kind of represents like having to do your own thing regardless of who like is acknowledging where you're at. It's from this band called From Indian Lakes, and it's the song Fog. It's the closer on their 3rd full length on an album called Able Bodies. That one's like one of my most played songs of all time because it's very much my like, all right, people aren't great, but like gotta keep doing this thing.
What's your shoe size?
14. It's a pain.
Best slice in New York?
I'm a Prince Street guy. People have feelings about that. I like the little bit deeper dish. I like my little crust on there.
Number 1 piece of advice for someone who wants to do what you do but doesn't think they can.
Just start making things for you. Just make things that you personally are proud of. Put yourself out there if you want to put yourself out there. If you don't, like it's totally okay to live a private life. But just like make things for you.
Jack Appleby is a great example of how leveraging personal branding and storytelling can be used to challenge the conventions we hold around what work is and what it should be. I hope you learned as much as we did today, found something you can apply to your life, and if nothing else, were inspired by Jack's story to take a hard look at your 9-to-5 and make sure that the way you work is working for you. If you want to join the thousands of other creative entrepreneurs like Jack who are building an income out of their impact, click the link in the description to join the club and learn how Teachable can help you do the same. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out our recommended next episode linked here. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.